And the graveyards are filled with people who are very surprised by death. If we were cognizant of our own inevitable death, our behavior would be very different. This is why it's important to study death, to meditate daily on one's death. This is not simply to meditate and think to oneself, one day I will die, so I better be a better person. Spiritual, practice more. It's fine to think this way, but the actual practice is to spend time visualizing the decay of one's body. Take a moment now. Feel this body. Become cognizant that it will die, that life will recede from it, and that all of its functions will stop. The blood will stop flowing, the breath will stop flowing, the brain will shut down, the organs will stop moving, and all of the heat will begin to recede towards the heart, and the body will become cold, and it will never move again. Do any of you feel terror? Fear? This is why you need to meditate. So that when the moment of your death arrives, you will not be afraid. The instant that you die, your state of mind determines what will happen to you next. If you die afraid, that fear will propel you. And you don't want that. We want to die cognizant, in harmony, peacefully, with a balanced psyche, so that as we pass through the doorway of death, we can enter into a new life cognizantly. You see, life is very complicated. Bring into your imagination now life. Not just your life, all life, all that is living. Imagine all life on every level. Quanta, molecules, cells, organs, organisms, families, communities, societies, cities, countries, continents, planets, solar systems, galaxies, universes. Life is huge. It's very difficult to hold that in one's mind. The immensity of living, of all that is alive. But you see, as complex and beautiful and terrifying as life is, it is only one side of a great coin. When you flip that coin, you have death. And it is just as rich, complex, sophisticated, beautiful, and terrifying as life. But we completely ignore it. Even though, for countless ages, we have passed from one side of the coin to the other. How do we know this is true? None of us remember, right? We know it's true because we know about energy. Anyone who's studied physics has heard of Einstein. And the great gift that Einstein gave to us was this: energy cannot die. Energy cannot be destroyed. Scientifically, this is a very profound and beautiful statement, just in terms of materialistic science. But this statement has even greater importance to your soul. The soul, the consciousness, is energy. You can test that. When you pay attention to something, you use energy. When someone pays attention to you, you can feel it. You can sense the energy. You can have all of your senses turned away from a person. But when they look at you, when they pay attention to you, you can feel it. And you turn around to say, somebody looking at me? Right? Everybody knows this. Everybody can experience that. You sense the energy of the consciousness, the attention of that person. Now in us, our consciousness is weak and small. It doesn't have much strength. It isn't trained. But if you train it, you can do things with it that we scarcely imagine. Consciousness is an energy, and energy cannot be destroyed. What this means is that the consciousness doesn't die. It doesn't die. The consciousness is an energy that changes. It changes according to cause and effect. This is what we need to understand. How it changes. What are the causes and what are the effects? When we say that consciousness does not die, we need to understand what that means. And how does this relate to death? There's a great teaching about death and life that can help us a lot when we try to understand if life, if energy, if consciousness cannot die, then how does that relate to this life and previous or subsequent lives? If we can accept the scientific fact that energy cannot be destroyed and thereby consciousness as an energy cannot be destroyed, what happens to it when we die? What happens to it before we are born? This is what we don't know. This is why we're afraid. You can find out what happens tonight. Every time you lay down to go to sleep, you die. The same thing that happens to you when you go down to sleep happens when you die. The energy of consciousness is modified. Instead of being here in the body, it goes out. And we experience what we call dreams. And a certain period of time goes by during which the physical body is resting, like a corpse. And after a certain period of time, the consciousness is pulled back. Maybe our alarm goes off, somebody wakes us, or we have a habit to get up at a certain time. The body is stirred and the consciousness comes back. And for a moment, we might remember, oh, I was here. I was at work in my dream doing this and doing that. But after a few minutes, we get up, we're active, we're doing things. We don't remember anymore what happened, right? Most of us remember very little of our dreams, and many of us remember nothing. That's exactly what happens when you die. Except, generally, it's more traumatic. Because generally, when we die, we don't die as peacefully as when we go to sleep at night. Generally, we die because of illness, because of sickness, because of pain, because of suffering. And thus, through a traumatic death, our consciousness is propelled through a state of being about which we have no recollection. And then propelled again through a state of birth that is traumatic and painful, about which we have no recollection. If you want to know what happens to you when you die, pay attention to what happens to you when you sleep at night. It's exactly the same thing. The only difference is the connection between the consciousness and the body is severed with death.